In Consumer Corner, we take a look at trends creating a buzz online in China. On today's show, we'll discuss the duality of rich provinces and their low-income citizens, and see what Chinese internet users have to say about it. China still considers itself a developing country, even though it's moved past many benchmarks. Some of the provinces in China have moved far faster than others, and they've become pretty wealthy. Their total GDP and GDP per capita reach those of multiple other countries. According to the World Bank, a country with over $10,000 in GDP per capita can be considered one that's entered developed country status. Currently, in some of China's cities and provinces, the GDP per capita surpassed that threshold. The latest one to pass that mark is the Guangdong province. The Guangdong Development and Reform Commission announced the province's GDP increased by 8.5%. It has exceeded $1 trillion in 2013. This is China's first province to surpass that GDP figure. According to the country's latest population census in 2010, the province has a population of 100 million. That means the GDP per capita of the province would exceed $10,000. As China Business News reported, before the Guangdong province, there were already several cities and provinces that surpassed that threshold. Shanghai was the first city to achieve that goal. In 2008, the city's GDP per capita reached $10,500. Beijing followed right after Shanghai. According to data from the Beijing Bureau of Statistics in 2009, Beijing's GDP per capita was $10,070. In 2010, Tianjin's GDP per capita surpassed $10,000. Although the number was far less than that of Shanghai and Beijing's in the beginning, it ended up moving much faster. After a series of investments, the city of Tianjin's GDP per capita beat out both of them. Its GDP per capita reached $15,400. Since 2012, GDP per capita in Chinese provinces also started getting past the $10,000 threshold. Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and Inner Mongolia all surpassed it that year. There seems to be a discrepancy between rich areas and the wealth of its citizens. The people are way poorer than you think. Incomes are small while the areas are rich. As China Youth Daily points out, China's unbalanced economic structure hasn't been changed since the 1990s. People's income levels only make up a small proportion of GDP. This is totally different from the current economic situation of developed countries, where their GDP per capita has surpassed $10,000. Professor Han Jiao from Jinan University told China Youth Daily that in developed countries, people's incomes occupy around 55% of GDP per capita on average. However, this rate in China is only about 40%. In China's most economically advanced province of Guangdong, people's incomes only occupy 44.4% of its GDP per capita in 2010. The percentage of Inner Mongolia is even lower. In 2012, local urban residents' annual disposable incomes were about $3,800. For rural residents, this number was only about $1,250. That was only occupied by 36% and 12% of GDP per capita, respectively. The Chinese government believes that relying on fixed asset investment and foreign trade can boost the economy. Having money for its citizens to spend was far from a priority. They wanted the country to grow in a Marxist model, having a few people get rich first, and then the rest would get rich later. As history has already shown with Russia, it's not such a smooth process. The GDP of certain areas can grow because GDP includes government spending and investment. Without large increases in disposable incomes, then people can buy all the products being made. This forces the country to be reliant upon foreign sales. In Inner Mongolia and Tianjin, the incomes of most people aren't very high. This is even though Inner Mongolia's GDP per capita ranks 6th highest of China's provinces. Its average personal income level is ranked at 10th. The same goes for Tianjin, where its GDP per capita topped the country. But people's annual salaries only rank 6th. This is a good example of a limitation of using GDP as a tool of measurement. The huge gap between high GDP per capita versus low income levels also created fierce discussion among Chinese internet users. One wrote, quote, "I used to be confused about why our country could be so rich, but we ordinary people don't feel like it. Now I get it." However, another Weibo user gave it some thought, quote, "China's GDP per capita is not trustworthy. Our government is using it to cheat our people. Only people's income levels can truly reflect the country's economic development." Some Weibo users sarcastically criticized GDPs per capita as a measurement tool. One wrote, quote, "If grabbing a millionaire and a bunch of poor people to calculate the average, the result would definitely show that everyone is a rich person. I feel so happy to be a rich guy with this method." Finally, a Weibo user concluded, quote, "One can only be called rich if every Chinese person can afford accommodation, entertainment, go to the hospital, and have an education. Otherwise, high GDP per capita can only mean a few people are really rich." China often uses the excuse that it's a developing country for its problems. It's obvious that parts of the country where major decisions for the country are made are wealthier than others. The cash is there to solve problems, but it certainly isn't being spread out. If incomes don't increase, the consumption won't increase. If that's the case, then the duality of China being both rich and poor will continue.